Well, we've been teasing this now for a little while, and his last book, Understanding Trump, was a #1 New York Times runaway bestseller, and he's the former Speaker of the House, and it's Newt Gingrich is with us. His book is just now out today, BarnesandNoble.com, Hannity.com, bookstores everywhere. It's called Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback. And in light of all the news we have today and the news we had last week about the economy, the summit is back on. The president moves the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, and we're out of that horrific Iranian deal. It seems like item by item, we're now on the path towards energy independence, largest tax cuts ever, individual mandate gone. The wall is going to be built. You can see how the president is unrelenting as it relates to that. It is about a comeback, and I do have the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, in studio with your first book interview. How are you?
I'm having a ball, and the whole point is that there's an America out there that is moving. It's moving with Trump. It's moving in part because of Trump. You look at the economy today, you look at the economy the week before he was elected, it's unbelievable. And you have the lowest black unemployment in history. And even liberals now, I mean, the New York Times actually had to run an article about how good the economy was.
I was quoting all of these sources last week, and I'm literally laughing, because we've run out of good things to say about how great the Trump economy is. I mean, it had to kill them to write that.
Well, and I think part of the reason I wrote Trump's America is that the story is about a lot more than President Trump. The story is about entrepreneurs and individuals, small businesses, the impact of new technology on oil and gas, across the board, the impact of new technology on space, where we now have reusable rockets for the first time, bringing down the cost very dramatically. So I think Americans need to understand that not only is the elite media biased and negative and covering trivia, but they're missing the whole bigger story of what's happening in the country and what's happening with the American people.
I think this is one of the things I love about you the most, and when we have been best friends, almost family now, when you really think about it. I mean, when I think of the journey, my personal journey, and how our roles and how we've intersected at every single point, important point, going back to when I was in Huntsville, Alabama, and you were on the rise to become the next Speaker of the House, and you were formulating the contract with America. Leading up to, I was the MC of that historic night, where you were, and watched you become the speaker. You're arguing in this book, there's something that I think is profound from a history perspective, and that is that in recent history, we've had three major advancements of the conservative agenda. Ronald Reagan, you and the contract, and now Donald Trump. Why have there been so many so-called conservatives, especially the intellectual elitist conservative or establishment conservative, that cannot see what you're laying out in simple truth in the book?
Well, first of all, a lot of those conservatives weren't for Ronald Reagan either. I mean, afterwards,
the
they
amiable
look back,
dunce?
Yeah, or voodoo economics.
Right. Good point.
Howard Baker described the tax cuts of 1981 as a riverboat gamble. But it's very similar to watch what's happening. Reagan, by sheer consistent force of personality and the fact that it worked. The economy was booming. The Soviet Union was collapsing. It was pretty hard not to think Reagan was successful. Well, look what's happening with Trump. And look, they're not the same personalities. They're very different styles. But Trump, by sheer brute persistence, has really enacted the most deregulation of any president in American history. In fact, probably more deregulation than all the presidents since World War II combined. Trump, by dint of a very disciplined approach, working with Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, is actually moving the judiciary dramatically towards a more conservative position. Trump finally figuring out how the Congress worked after all the problems with Obamacare, turned around and in 4 months passed the largest tax cut in history. Again, moving things. And you see this, and this is very much like Reagan, you see it in the objective outer world. It's not the New York Times editorial page or the Washington Post editorial page, but it's month after month of more people being hired. It is the polls that say consumer confidence is high. Gallup just came out with a survey that said 65% of the country now thinks you can get a good job, about double from what it was under Obama.
14 states record unemployment numbers, record low unemployment numbers for women in the workforce, African Americans, Hispanic Americans. It's breathtaking. We're also getting record revenues to the government. But I want to stay on the comparisons between the way even Republicans had reacted to Ronald Reagan and the way Republicans, or so-called Republicans, establishment people, look at NRO, for example. You know, with the exception of Victor Davis Hanson and Andy McCarthy, I mean, they were so hostile to President Trump. And yet he was always advocating for originalists on the Supreme Court, border security, tax cuts, and a peace through strength foreign policy. Maybe that stylistically, I understand they may not like him, but in terms of what he stood for and what he's now followed through on.
Well, I think there's a part of this, though, that goes back to the concept of control. By the standards of the Republican old order, Donald Trump perennially looks like he's out of control. And the truth is, at one level, he is out of control. And this is a guy who can have the South Korean intelligence minister come in and say, had a good meeting with Kim Jong-un, he'd like to get with you, without going through any briefings, any vetting, any structure. He says, sounds good to me, let's meet. Well, if you are an old-fashioned establishment foreign policy expert, you think that should be a 7-month project. And by the way, you should play a major role. So part of what Trump does is he devalues intellectuals and basically says, if I really needed you, I'd call you. But the truth is, he doesn't sit up late at night reading AEI or Brookings or these other people, or for that matter, National Review. He very intensely follows his own gut, I think more than any president in modern times. And if you're an intellectual, that makes you very nervous.
As you point out in the book, and you break the book into 2 parts, and I think you go right through the comeback that we have now been witnessing, and it's historic in so many ways. And yeah, I think he's operating government a lot like the way he probably operated the Trump organization, which means when James Comey was his FBI director, you're my FBI director. Right? You work for me.
That's right.
And by the way, he does work for him, and he does have the right to fire him. But you talk about it in terms of the getting rid of burdensome regulation, the tax cuts. You talk about, something as simple and profound as energy independence, which you started yourself on this program, drill here, drill now, pay less. The judiciary impact, Neil Gorsuch, and maybe more to come. There's nothing that I see but for trade, and I think trade is just him negotiating. I don't think he wants a trade war. He wants better deals. I think it just, to the letter, fits the definition of a conservative. You recognized it before the election, and a lot of people of your stature would refuse to. Were hostile and are hostile to him.
Right. Well, I think part of it is his language. I happen to agree with him that if you watch the over 20 years of the Chinese cheating, that in fact we need a pretty hard fight with the Chinese over trade. I don't agree with him we need a fight with Canada, where we actually have a trade surplus. And I think in that sense, probably he needs to shake up a little bit the way they're doing the trade deals. But certainly in terms of China, I feel comfortable. I think in the degree to which he was basically saying, look, and I agree with this, but I think it shook a lot of the traditionalists. He made the exactly correct point. We have been fighting since 9/11/01. That's 16 years. This fall, 17 years. Longest continuous conflict in American history. And you don't see a strategy for victory. And I think he raised that question. And for a lot of the old timers, it was, oh my God, you're not allowed to say that, even if it's true, and we don't want to think about it.
Well, I'll say this in retrospect, as somebody, we know Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, but in retrospect, if we're going to send over 5,000 Americans to die and so many others to get blown up and their legs blown off and their arms blown off and their faces, permanently injured, and we're not going to win, or we're going to lose 58,000, brave Americans in Vietnam, and we're not going to win, and we're going to politicize these wars and say, never mind. We can't do that to any American family anymore.
That's right. And I think that Trump is very cautious about that, and it's part of what makes him different. The other part of it, I think, is that people, I think, are shaken because he does move very fast. And I think your analogy is right. You know, people tend to forget that in The Apprentice, the most famous single phrase was "you're fired." So it shouldn't have come as a great shock to Comey that Trump knew how to say "you're fired." I mean, he'd made an entire career on television.
And Comey himself recognized he could be fired for any reason.
Yeah, and the truth is, as if you go back and you read Rosenstein's memo, which Trump got before firing Comey, it is so devastating on Comey that the only criticism I have is Trump should have released the memo on a Friday, let it be the talk show topic for the whole weekend, and then sadly on Monday, done what Rosenstein compelled him to do.
Well, I guess that all goes into it. With all that said, I don't think I have ever, and maybe you can find something in history that I can't, well, especially the history of this country. We have never, ever witnessed such a concerted effort. Now we know a real deep state that used real power, the powerful tools of intelligence, and lying to FISA courts and you know, literally rigging investigations for one candidate and attacking another candidate to undermine that candidate.
Well, look, I think that's part of what we cover in taking on Mueller and the deep state in my new book, Trump's America, that Americans have to be very concerned about the depth of abuse of power under Obama. They were abusing power to protect Hillary Clinton. They were abusing power to go after Donald Trump. Then they began abusing power to protect themselves from us learning what they were doing.
Right.
And as recently as the last couple of days, I've heard Chairman Nunes say he still hasn't gotten the written material.
We'll take a break. We have Newt Gingrich with us in studio today for the full hour, launching his brand new book. It's now on BarnesandNoble.com, Hannity.com, bookstores everywhere. Trump's America, the truth about our nation's great comeback. You think everybody would be happy about it, but apparently they're just so hell-bent on anything that Donald Trump does that for them to succeed, he has to fail, and the country fail. We'll get into that on the other side. All right, as we continue, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, launching his brand new book, and it's now out in bookstores everywhere, Trump's America, the truth about our nation's great comeback. We kind of saw something happening, and we were both out there on a limb. I think my obituary in terms of being a host was written 50,000 different ways. Goodbye, Hannity. Great call on Trump. We were right, they were wrong. What did you see?
Well, first of all,
yeah,
I just want to say, during Election Day, I called into a Frank Luntz phone call that was just using exit poll numbers, and it was so dismal.
Oh, yeah.
I just went to dinner with Clifton and said, that's it. You know, because I'm like you. You and I were we were 100 miles out.
No. we were up the tree, at the top of the smallest limb, hanging on to the leaf and the string of the leaf and ready to dive.
Now, there is, however, I will say, there's one of my favorites on YouTube, was Megyn Kelly and me. You can just put in Newt Gingrich and Megyn Kelly. And it's 2 weeks out. And I'm there with her, and she's going, well, you know, all the polls show he's going to lose by 10 points. And I said, yeah, he's going to win. And she said, well, how can you say he's going to win if he's 10 points down?
How did you know?
Well, first of all, I have a pretty good sense of how Pennsylvania and Callista's from Wisconsin, how these places operate. And I felt that the Democrats had so repudiated the unionized, working, blue-collar American that this was going to be payback.
And it was.
And it was.
You know, I've got a great story I'll tell you on the other side of this break here, but the thing is, and you could see it when Obama was running, it didn't matter how much vetting I did alone as the media gave him a pass. It wasn't going to matter. You saw the crowds, you saw the energy, it was real. And nobody was paying attention. Donald Trump was packing stadiums, and literally 30,000 other people were outside dying to get in.
Well, remember, in the modern era, 30,000 people inside, plus smartphones, which they use to take pictures to send on average, I think, to 200 people. So 30,000 becomes 6 million contacts. And the last day, I think he did 5 or 6.
6, yeah.
6. And she did one event with 1,500 people.
Yeah. We'll take a quick break. The new book, it's out now. It's called Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback. More with Speaker Gingrich on the other side. Don't forget Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and, of course, Hannity.com, bookstores all around the country. Quick break, right back, and we will continue straight ahead. All right, let me go to the president. This is on Inauguration Day as we continue with Newt Gingrich. Amazon.com, books, BarnesandNoble.com, and bookstores everywhere. Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Great Comeback. Here's the president on his Inauguration Day.
Today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. Politicians prospered, but the jobs left and the factories closed. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country. Their victories have not been your victories. Their triumphs have not been your triumphs. And while they celebrated in our nation's capital, there was little to celebrate for struggling families all across our land. That all changes starting right here and right now, because this moment is your moment. It belongs to you. It belongs to everyone gathered here today and everyone watching all across America. This is your day. This is your celebration. And this, the United States of America, is your country. What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. Everyone is listening to you now. You came by the tens of millions to become part of a historic movement, the likes of which the world has never seen before. And we all salute the same great American flag. And whether a child is born in the urban sprawl of Detroit or the windswept plains of Nebraska, they look up at the same night sky, they fill their heart with the same dreams, and they are infused with the breath of life by the same almighty Creator. So to all Americans in every city, near and far, small and large, from mountain to mountain, from ocean to ocean, hear these words: you will never be ignored again. Your voice, your hopes, and your dreams will define our American destiny. And your courage and goodness and love will forever guide us along the way. Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. God bless America.
All right, as we continue with Newt Gingrich, I want to go back, because I think this president he has permanently changed the conventional wisdom about running. And in many ways, I think you had a big part to play in the Gingrich revolution or the contract revolution. I still to this day suggest people ought to duplicate and learn from what works in the past. And I have, you can see on my thing, Conservative Solution Caucus, I gave it to these idiots in 2013, and of course nobody listened. Why would they ever listen to a talk show host? But more importantly, you saw something here, and this is what we were talking about. And more importantly, it's a president that makes promises and keeps them all, and wants to keep them all. Every other president promised to move Jerusalem to the capital. They never did it. When he said he was going to pull out of the Iranian deal, he pulled out. Nobody saw North Korea coming, and he gave us the tax cuts he promised. He moved us towards energy independence. He's building the wall. That wall will be built. I have zero doubt.
Well, look, I think one of the things that's fascinating is Trump on little things is totally unpredictable, occasionally self-destructive, wanders around. You don't know what he's up to. On really big things, he is amazingly stable. I got calls from your European friends towards the very end on the Iran deal, and they said, "What can we do? What can we do?" And I said, "Look, you either get him a really better deal, or he's gone." Mm-hmm. And they said, "Oh, how can he do it?" I said, "He said this for a year and a half. He actually means it." Same thing with as you know, I was the original author of the bill to move the embassy to Jerusalem, and so I watched all these presidents promise in the campaign and then break their word.
They all did.
In that sense, I think Trump has a very, very good track record.
But that's what worked also with the contract. And the contract was, we're going to vote on these things, not pass them all. We're going to vote on them in 100 days. Give us a shot.
Yeah, we designed the contract to be totally honest and totally enforceable, which is why we couldn't promise passage of some of those things, but we could promise voting on them. Remember, I grew up under Reagan. Reagan ran on a handful of things. He stuck to them. He totally believed them. He lived his life out with them for 8 years. The Soviet Empire disappeared. I always try to remind people, not only did he relaunch the American economy, not only did he rebuild civic culture and pride in being an American, the Soviet Union disappeared. That should be a fairly historic presidency.
I love in the first part of the book how you specifically, chapter 1, 2, the comeback of the country, the comeback of one nation under God, American sovereignty, of freedom of speech, of the tax cuts and constitutional judiciary. And I love the fact that in the second part, you talk about ongoing challenges for the president. Right. And number one on that side is fighting fake news and the rule of law versus the rule of Robert Mueller and draining what is a real sewer and swamp in D.C. And he has I don't think there's a president that is being challenged in terms of his power, in terms of a real threat to his presidency, but as we didn't know, but we do now, as this president was as a candidate, as a president-elect, and I do believe the left absolutely wants him gone. Impeach any way they can succeed.
Look, as a historian, I look at all this stuff, and it strikes me that it's so obvious if you go up to 50,000 feet. Every element of the left and about 20% of the Republican Party collectively would do anything to get rid of Donald J. Trump.
How do we deal? Here's what's happened, and I do my nutshell version of it, is it starts with Hillary Clinton, and she did not want congressional oversight. She commits a felony, violates the Espionage Act. Then she's subpoenaed her emails. She deletes 33,000 subpoenaed emails, acid washed her hard drive, had somebody that works for her break up her devices. Okay, then we have Strzok, Comey, Page, and that whole mess. We know that they favored her over him. All the messages show it. They were writing an exoneration in May. They didn't interview her to the weekend of the 4th of July. 2 days later, they exonerate her, but the exoneration was written long before the investigation by Strzok and Page. And then we're now learning that they launched this whole Russia probe way before the time that they said that they did. And more importantly, and sadly, they used a Clinton bought and paid for, foreign national put together, dossier with Russian lies to manipulate the American people, lying to FISA court judges in an original application and 3 subsequent applications, and they never told the judges she paid for it. That is, as quickly as I can say it, the biggest abuse of power and corruption scandal in history.
I think the greatest disappointment in the Trump administration is the Attorney General.
Huge. I agree with you.
Look, if we had a real Attorney General, all of this would be under investigation. I mean, if we had a crusading Attorney General who was prepared to turn over all the rocks and find all of the snakes and insects and other things that are hiding, we would be, first of all, astonished how sick the system had gotten and how much of it goes to Barack Obama and how much of it goes to Valerie Jarrett. And this,
well, that was the big revelation last week, is that we found a struck page memo that says this is being run by the White House of Barack Obama.
But look, again, as a historian and an occasional novelist,
you couldn't make it up.
No, you have to say to yourself, given the style of the Obama White House, how likely is it that they got a FISA court decision and the president didn't know anything about it? Zero. It's impossible. That was an administration totally run by the genius of the one person at the center who every morning knew he was a genius.
Barack Obama. Here's, but this is a real clear present danger for the president, in my view. Do you agree with that?
I think it's a real present danger for the country.
Agreed. If we don't get this right, tell me if I'm wrong. Are we the former Soviet Union? Are we now Venezuela?
I'd say more Venezuela than Soviet Union. I mean, decay, corruption. I mean, one of the things that's
breakdown of our constitutional,
a total breakdown of the constitutional system. And one of the things that's very obvious from watching these guys is all of them assumed Hillary would win, and all of us assumed the cover-up would go on. And that's why you now have this amazing resistance. I mean, this election, and I try to explain this in my new book, Understanding Trump's America, that Trump's America depends upon us being able to retain power. Because if we lose power,
but look
if the
what's
left
happened.
Comes in, boy.
Look at what's happened. I mean, now the polls show, 60% of the American people think it should be over, what they've done here.
Yes.
People, literally this all started in terms of our investigation really getting some legs, and we were right. It was March 7th of 2017 on Hannity that we literally, Sarah Carter, John Solomon broke the story that in fact surveillance of a FISA warrant had been issued against, we thought, Trump Tower at the time. We didn't have it exactly right. But in the course, everything I just laid out for you has been proven true. Every bit of it.
And what it makes you, what all of our listeners should understand is, this is not just a threat to the president. You allow the FBI and the Justice Department to be corrupted, and their power is so enormous. It is a threat to every American.
How many people tell me, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. By the way, they're coming to get you.
Well, look, I think that's a clear and present danger.
Great. You going to bail me out?
Well, if I'm not in there with you.
We'll be, we were best friends for a long time. I think we could work it out.
Yeah.
All right, got to take a break. More with Newt Gingrich in studio. He'll be on Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern on the Fox News Channel. Trump's America, the truth about our nation's comeback, and Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, Hannity.com, bookstores everywhere. As we continue our final moments, Newt Gingrich, his brand new book, this is a great read. You break it down, amazing, positive, successful story of the Trump presidency. It's called Trump's America, the truth about our nation's great comeback, and also the dangers that the president talks about. I want to go back. I was going to tell the story earlier, but I talked to the now president 3 times on Election Day in 2016. First, I said, I saw the exit polls. Somebody's going to come in your office. They're probably drawing straws right now and give you horrible news. You lost every state. And then I told him the story about, in 2004, I was on the air. John Kerry was going to be the next president. At 5:35 that day, the vice president at the time, Dick Cheney, called my radio program and was begging people in Florida and everywhere else to get out. And the next time I talked to him was about 8 o'clock that night. I said, I'm telling you, you're in it. I'm looking at I stay home on election nights. I have all my career. I'm telling you, you're in this. I'm looking very closely at all these counties. It looks really good. And the last time I called him was, I think after Wisconsin, I said, Mr. President. And he said, how do you know? How do you know? And I knew I was right at that point.
Yeah. Well, I had the same feeling. Chris and I actually went across Wisconsin that Saturday, and in rural Wisconsin, there were hundreds of Trump signs and literally zero for Hillary. And this was an area that used to vote Democrat. And I called Reince Priebus, the national chairman at the time, from Wisconsin, and he said, I'm seeing the same thing. And you just knew if Wisconsin was going Trump,
it was over.
Then it was over.
Yeah. All right. So we'll have more on TV tonight. Congratulations. Your last book on the president, really did well, Understanding Trump. It's brand new out today. Trump's America, The Truth About Our Nation's Comeback, Hannity.com. Mr. Speaker, congratulations. A #1 bestseller, I'm sure, in the making. And people do need to read this. It's very revealing. The story of media will not tell you about how successful the president is and, frankly, the dangers that exist for the president to this day.